And now I'd like to welcome to the stage the Director of the Bureau of Land Management, Tracy Stone-Manny. Tracy has spent her career devoted to public service and conservation. Prior to her confirmation as Director of Bureau of Land Management in 2021, she served as a Senior Advisor for Conservation Policy and Associate Vice President of Public Lands of the National Wildlife Federation. Before that, she served as Chief of Staff to former Montana Governor Steve Bullock, where she helped to pass a water compact with the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes. All that in addition to helping launch the state's first Office of Outdoor Recreation. She has also served as the Director of Montana's Department of Environmental Quality, overseeing the state's water, air, mining, and remediation activities. It is my pleasure to bring such a dedicated public service to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Tracy Stone-Manny.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here in a room with real people, not speaking at a flat screen. I cannot tell you what a joy it is. I'm sure you all feel the same, and I'm grateful to NACD for gathering us today. And I need to echo briefly the previous panel's plea to break out of our silos. As you heard, I am from Montana, and I have seen across the decades remarkable work happen from the ground, people working together to advance mutual goals and needs and making Montana a better place for the future. And I have deep faith that we can continue to do that work if we work together on the ground and step out of our silos in doing so. So NACD's work with respect to land, water, and climate change mirror many of my own interests as I lead the BLM. The BLM manages 245 million acres of public lands, mostly across the West. We manage these lands for multiple use, including recreation, energy development, ranching, mining, and forestry, among others. I've been in the role as director for about 4 months now. And in my brief time with you this morning, I'd like to talk about some of the recent policy and budget developments that concern your work. The bipartisan infrastructure law is a once-in-a-generation investment that'll touch every corner of America, investing in restoration, commercial development, and the climate crisis while creating good jobs, advancing environmental justice, and boosting local economies, all by delivering really long-awaited investments. Earlier this month, the Department of Interior announced that $1.1 billion in funding to states will be coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law to clean up orphaned oil and gas wells across the country. And that's just a start. Over the next decade, the bill will invest over $4 billion to put people to work reclaiming these wells. Millions of Americans across the country live within just 1 mile of an orphaned well. They're polluting our backyards, recreation areas, and public and private lands all across the country. And these historic investments to clean up these hazardous sites will create good-paying jobs, catalyze economic growth and revitalization, and reduce dangerous methane leaks. The legislation will also provide money to address intensifying droughts, wildfires, and flooding that you all know so well. It invests heavily in wildfire risk reduction and safeguarding our communities, providing a historic $4.5 billion for wildland fire management efforts over the next 5 years. And in addition to reducing wildfire risk, the law also provides funding for improving ecological health. $900 million is coming to the Department of Interior for this. This is going to put people to work on projects that restore wildlife habitat and ecological health on our public lands, from attacking cheatgrass to restoring forest watersheds. It'll bolster the same kind of work you're doing all across the country. You all know this well. Careful stewardship of land and water that we all rely on is not only critical to all we do, it's our responsibility to future generations. It's on our minds every day. That's why the Biden administration has launched the America the Beautiful initiative. This is a 10-year, locally led, voluntary campaign to conserve and restore the lands and waters upon which we all depend and which bind us together as Americans. The goal is to conserve at least 30% of lands and waters by 2030. The scientific community made this recommendation to safeguard our community's health, our food supply, biodiversity, and prosperity. Scientists warn us that we stand to lose a third of wildlife in the coming decades unless we act, a third. That tells me we need to use every single tool in the toolbox. Protecting lands, while is an important responsibility to future generations, it cannot be our only focus. We have to put wildlife acres back on the board through collaborative restoration projects. We've all seen examples of what this looked like. Voluntary conservation programs on working lands that not only improve ecological health, but at the same time increase the bottom line for the producer. Forest restoration that fixes fish habitat and delivers cold, clean water downstream. Wetland restoration that brings marshes back to life, as well as their natural ability to filter and deliver clean water. Coastal rehab projects that not only protect communities, but restore ecological function. The list goes on and on. Hundreds of locally supported conservation and restoration efforts are underway across America on both public and private lands, and working together, we can advance them further in the next 10 years to strengthen our economy, fight climate change, address environmental injustice, and improve habitat and open space for both people and wildlife. And I'm certain that NACD is going to be right at the forefront of it. Let's talk about grazing. BLM's portfolio includes managing livestock grazing on 155 million acres of public lands, mostly in the West. And like many of you, I am deeply concerned with the extreme drought conditions and its impacts. 2021 was one of the most difficult seasons in recent years, so we're already working towards managing any potential problems for this year. Our partners who run livestock understand the need to adjust grazing during drought to protect the long-term health of the range. That's because we have a shared bottom line, the health of the land. BLM also has a pilot program that aims to provide more flexibility to ranchers to achieve land health and ranch sustainability. It's called outcomes-based grazing, and I'm pretty excited about its potential. The program is designed to offer a more collaborative approach between the BLM and its partners on grazing authorizations, especially in years when we face severe drought and wildfire. And one thing is for sure, when we work together, we get better results. It's the kind of collaborative spirit I hope folks will bring to our plans to update grazing regulations. Our aim is to include greater flexibility for land management, to use adaptive management that quickly responds to changing resource and climate conditions, and to ensure the regs are consistent with the current legal and regulatory framework. We're planning to hold open houses and virtual meetings throughout the process. And while the exact timing is fluid, we expect to publish a final rule in 2023. But we will not do so before doing a whole lot of work, talking to folks like you, holding roundtables, holding both in person and on the flat screen, and getting as much of information from the ground as we can to inform the work. So talk to us. We're interested in your input, and we need your input. Another challenging issue, as I'm sure you all know, is how the BLM manages and protects wild horses and burros on public lands to ensure we have healthy herds on healthy lands. The Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act of 1971 commits the Bureau to preserve and protect these animals as part of the natural system of public lands, consistent with our multiple use mission. Here's the bad news. We're facing a catastrophic population boom. As of March last year, we estimated that there are 86,000 wild horses and burros living on public lands, and that is 3 times more than the number that can ensure long-term health for the land and the animals themselves. It's a crisis situation for many horses and burros. Climate change and drought are magnifying the impacts that overpopulation can have on herd health and land health. So we've got to address the underlying problems of too many horses on the range. I recently announced plans to gather a record number of animals from overpopulated herds across across the West and through the end of this year. It's hard. But we're doing this to protect the health of the herd and the health of the land. And to help in the long term, we're also nearly doubling last year's record number of fertility control treatments. We're also asking for help in developing new research and techniques to slow population growth of wild horse and burros. We've got a request for proposals on the street circulating in the research community right now to help us dial in the science on this really tough issue. We're also placing more animals into private care, a critical part of our efforts to reduce overpopulation on the range. In the last 3 years, the BLM successfully placed a total of nearly 22,000 excess wild horses and burros into private care through adoptions and sales, thanks in large part to new and innovative programs. The stories of people creating remarkable relationships with these animals are just heartwarming. So if you want to adopt a great horse, call us. Turning back to the full scope and size of all the work ahead of us, we have to look to one of the biggest priorities and responsibilities facing all of us: addressing climate change. A changing climate is happening before our very eyes. Amplified droughts and wildfires, threatened habitats, and an increase to the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. It threatens our very way of life. It makes management decisions all the harder. You all know this. You're living it. Everyone, whether in rural, urban, or tribal communities, is affected by the heavy burdens that accompany these extreme conditions. As land managers, we know that everyone has a personal stake in the health of the landscape. We understand that the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and the health of the economy is inexorably tied to the natural systems that support all life on Earth. That's why President Biden and Secretary Haaland are so committed to tackling this tough issue. Me as well. As you've heard in a very brief time, we've got a lot of work to do together, and you all understand the immense value of our public lands, how wise it was for our elected leaders to create them for us generations ago. We all have an enormous responsibility to ensure future generations benefit from them just as we have. I appreciate your time today, and I so look forward to our work together in the coming years. Thank you so much.